I've always been the dependable one, the one who didn't ask for much, the one who quietly filled in the gaps when others fell short. My name is Matthew, and for years my family has relied on me like a silent lifeline, a source of support they never truly appreciated. My brother James, 6 years older, was always the golden child. Successful, charming, and married to Anna, a woman who could light up any room. Together they had 2 kids, Tom and Lily, the picture-perfect family. They were the ones my parents, John and Margaret, always doted on. Meanwhile, I was just there. Not the star, not the one with a beautiful family to boast about at Sunday dinners, but the one who paid the bills, showed up when called, and never made a fuss. It started small, as these things often do. "Hey, Matt." My mom would say, her voice light but with a hint of expectation. "Can you cover the electric bill this month? Your father and I are a bit tight. Or Tom needs braces. It's just so expensive these days. You're doing well, right?" James would ask, his tone casual, like he was just mentioning the weather. And I always said yes. Why? Because I could. Because I didn't have kids. Because I wasn't married. Because I had the means, and frankly the guilt. The guilt of being the one who didn't have a family to support, who didn't have the same financial burdens as my brother. For years I poured my hard-earned money into their lives, covering unexpected repairs, paying for my niece and nephew's school supplies, even chipping in for family vacations I was never invited to. And my parents would smile, patting my shoulder, saying, "You're so lucky, Matt. You don't have all these responsibilities like James does." Lucky, that's what they called it. I told myself it was fine. It was family after all. And besides, I wasn't struggling. I didn't have a wife or kids, no mortgage, no massive expenses. I could afford to be generous. But as the years went by, that generosity became less about family and more about obligation. I became their safety net, their invisible crutch, and I let it happen. Then one day, I decided I was done waiting for life to come to me. I had dreamed of traveling for years, of exploring places I'd only seen in magazines or on TV. I had saved up, planned it out, even put together a rough itinerary. Italy, Rome, Florence, Venice. I had always wanted to walk those ancient streets, to feel the weight of history under my feet, to stand before the Colosseum and just breathe. So without telling anyone, I booked the trip. Paid for every cent myself. It was my one selfish act, my small rebellion against the role I had been pushed into. I felt a strange mix of excitement and guilt as I stood in line at the airport, passport in hand, waiting to board my economy flight. It wasn't first class, but it was mine, paid for with my own sweat and sacrifice. And then I heard it. "Tom, put your backpack down. You don't need all that in first class." I turned, my heart tightening, and there they were. My brother James, his wife Anna, their 2 kids, and my parents, all standing in the priority boarding line, dressed in matching travel outfits, laughing and relaxed. For a moment I thought I had lost my mind. The same family who had always claimed they couldn't afford to take me on vacation, the same brother who had called me just months ago asking for help with his mortgage, was now standing in line for first class. Maybe they saved up for this. Maybe it was a rare splurge, a gift to themselves for all their hard work. I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. Then I heard my mom laugh. "I still feel bad we couldn't take Matt." Anna chuckled, rolling her eyes. "Oh, please. He wouldn't have fit in." I felt something inside me snap, a sharp, bitter twist in my gut. Fit in? I wouldn't have fit in. The boarding call broke my trance, and I watched them walk through the first-class gate, my parents laughing, my brother holding his wife's hand, their kids chattering excitedly. I didn't say a word. I didn't confront them. I just stood there, frozen, as they disappeared through the gate, completely unaware that I had seen everything. And in that moment, something changed. I boarded my flight, found my cramped economy seat, and stared out the window as the plane took off. My mind replaying that scene over and over. The laughter, the casual dismissal, the unspoken truth that I had never been truly valued. As the plane cut through the clouds, I made a silent promise to myself: no more. No more being the invisible son, the forgotten brother, the endless ATM. I would make this trip my own, a step toward a life where I wasn't just their backup plan, their silent supporter. It was time to take my life back. When I landed in Rome, the air felt different. It was thick with history, the kind you could almost taste. The cobbled streets, the ancient buildings, the distant echoes of past empires, it all felt surreal. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely free. I spent my days wandering through the narrow alleys of Trastevere, sipping espresso at tiny bustling cafes, and standing in awe beneath the towering columns of the Colosseum. I even took a day trip to Florence, losing myself in the art and architecture that had defined the Renaissance. But at night when I sat alone on my hotel balcony, staring at the city lights flickering in the distance, my mind would wander back to that moment at the airport. He wouldn't have fit in. That single careless sentence from Anna echoed in my head, scratching at something deep inside me. It wasn't just the money or even the vacation. It was the realization that my family never really saw me as one of them. I had always been the one to show up to cover the bills, to be the silent backbone of the family, but I had never truly belonged. They took my help for granted, viewed my support as a given, and had never once considered that I might have dreams and desires of my own. One night, as I watched the Tiber River reflect the city lights, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to demand apologies or explanations. I was just going to stop. No more paying their bills. No more covering for their mistakes. No more being the forgotten son. When I returned home, the silence was almost liberating. My phone, which had been a constant source of demands and guilt trips, was now quiet. No last-minute requests for money, no frantic calls about broken appliances or unpaid school fees. Just peace. Then a few days later, my mother called. "Matt, sweetheart, how was your trip?" "It was great," I replied, my tone flat. "That's wonderful. Listen, your father and I were wondering if you could help us out a little this month. Just a bit extra for groceries, you know how things are." I paused, letting the silence stretch between us. Then I laughed. It wasn't planned, just a sharp, bitter sound that slipped out before I could stop it. "Groceries," I repeated. "You mean like the ones you bought on your way back from first class?" There was a long, uncomfortable silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her scrambling for a response. "Matt, that was different," she said, her voice suddenly defensive. "We had some airline miles saved up, and Anna found a great deal." "Don't—" I cut her off, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "Just don't." She stammered, trying to find the right words, but I didn't give her the chance. "You didn't even consider inviting me." I continued, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. "You just assumed I'd be fine, that I'd pick up the slack like always. But I'm done." Another long silence. "Matt, don't be like this," she said finally, her tone shifting to that familiar mix of guilt and manipulation. "We're family. Families help each other." "Do they?" I asked, my voice steady. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I've been doing all the helping while you and James just take and take without a second thought." I hung up before she could respond, my heart pounding in my chest. For the first time in years, I felt something like control. 2 days later, my brother called. "What do you want, James?" I said, skipping the pleasantries. He paused, clearly thrown off by my tone. "Look, Matt, I don't know what's gotten into you, but Mom and Dad are really upset. They said you hung up on them." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling as I let out a slow, controlled breath. "James," I said, my voice cold, "I'm done. I'm done being the backup plan, the silent supporter, the forgotten son. If you need help, figure it out yourself. Don't be like this." He snapped, his tone shifting from confusion to anger. "You're being selfish. You don't have a family. You don't have real responsibilities. It's different for you." "Right," I said, my voice calm but cutting. "And yet I'm the one who's been paying for your kids' soccer fees, your surprise car repairs, and Mom and Dad's countless emergencies. Maybe it's time you figured out how to stand on your own." Another long silence, then a sharp, bitter laugh from his end. "Wow, you really have changed," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Yeah," I replied, my tone steady, "and I'm not going back." I hung up, my hands trembling slightly, but for the first time in years, I felt truly free. I had expected backlash, but the sheer intensity of it still caught me off guard. Within days of cutting them off, my phone was flooded with missed calls and messages. First, my mom. "Matt, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this is not okay. We're family. Families support each other. Call me back." Then my dad. "Son, stop being dramatic. You know your brother and his kids need your help. Be reasonable." And then, of course, James. "Wow, really? You're just going to ignore us now? You really think you're better than us? Unbelievable." I ignored every single one. I had made my choice and I wasn't going to back down. I poured myself into work, started hitting the gym again, even picked up a few old hobbies I had let go of over the years. I felt lighter, like I had shed an invisible weight that had been pressing down on me for too long. But predictably, the guilt trip soon turned to panic. A week later, I got a call from my mom while I was out for a morning run. I let it go to voicemail. Not even a minute later, my phone buzzed with a text. "Matt, we have a problem. Please call me." I rolled my eyes. Another problem, another crisis. The kind that I was supposed to fix. Then another text, this one more frantic. "It's about the house." I stopped mid-stride, my heart rate spiking for a completely different reason. The house. Of course, I had suspected something like this might happen, but a part of me had hoped I was wrong. I called her back, the phone ringing only once before she picked up, her voice shaky. "Matt?" She breathed, clearly relieved. "I didn't want to worry you, but your father and we're behind on the mortgage. The bank has started sending notices." I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. Of course they hadn't told me this earlier. They had probably been counting on my usual bailout to cover the gap. "And you're just telling me this now," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "We didn't want to bother you," she replied quickly, the panic in her voice sharp. "But now, well, we need your help. Just this once. Just to keep us afloat until things settle." I felt a bitter laugh rising in my chest, but I held it back. "Kind of funny," I said, my tone dripping with a sarcasm I rarely let slip, "that you could afford first-class tickets but not your mortgage." Silence, then a shaky breath from her end. "It wasn't like that," she protested, her voice trembling. "Matt, you don't understand. We just wanted to do something nice for James and the kids. We thought we had time." I shook my head, feeling that familiar knot of frustration tighten in my chest. "You didn't think twice about spending money on them, but when it comes to something important, suddenly you're broke," I snapped. "Matt," she whispered, her voice breaking, "we need you." I took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch out, feeling the weight of her words settle into the cracks of my already strained patience. "I know," I said finally, my voice steady but distant, "but you're going to have to figure this one out without me." And then for the second time in as many weeks, I hung up on my mother. The next few days were eerily quiet. No more frantic calls, no more guilt-laden voicemails. I should have felt relieved, but instead I just felt unsettled, like the calm before a storm. Then one evening, there was a loud, insistent knock at my door. I had just settled in with a cup of coffee and a good book, finally starting to unwind when the pounding started. I opened the door to find James standing there, his face flushed, his jaw tight. "Seriously, Matt," he snapped, pushing past me into my apartment. "You're just going to abandon Mom and Dad when they need you the most." I closed the door, slowly turning to face him, my jaw clenched. "Excuse me," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Don't play dumb," he shot back, his eyes blazing. "Mom told me you refused to help with the mortgage. Are you really that heartless?" I felt my fists clench at my sides, a slow burn of anger spreading through my veins. "Heartless?" I repeated, my voice low but sharp. Coming from the guy who sat in first class with his wife and kids, laughing about how I wouldn't fit in? "You've got some nerve, James." He blinked, momentarily thrown off, then scoffed. "Oh, come on," he said, rolling his eyes. "You're still mad about that? Grow up, Matt. We didn't mean anything by it." I took a slow, deliberate step toward him, my eyes never leaving his. "You didn't mean anything by it," I said, my voice cold and steady. "You've been taking advantage of me for years. You've treated me like your personal ATM, never once thinking about what I might need, what I might want. And now when I finally draw a line, I'm the bad guy." He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off, my voice rising for the first time. "Get out, James," I said, pointing toward the door. "If you're not here to apologize, if you're just here to lay on another guilt trip, then get the hell out." He stood there for a moment, his face a mix of anger and disbelief, then turned sharply and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. For a long time, I just stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, the echo of the slamming door ringing in my ears. Then slowly, I let out a long breath and sat down, feeling a strange, unfamiliar sense of peace settle over me. For the first time in years, I had stood my ground. I had said no. And it felt incredible. I expected fallout after my confrontation with James, but I hadn't anticipated just how quickly things would unravel. The calls from my parents became less frequent but more desperate. My mother's messages shifted from guilt-laden pleas to outright panic. My father, always the quieter of the two, had even left a few curt, borderline angry voicemails. "Matt," his deep voice crackled through my phone one morning, "stop this nonsense. You know how much your mother worries. Call us back." Another one 2 days later. "Son, you're acting like a stranger. We're family. We take care of each other. Don't let your pride get in the way." And then the final message that made my blood run cold. "Matt, this is serious. We're losing the house." I sat there, phone in hand, staring at the wall as my father's words sank in. Losing the house? The home where I had grown up? The place where we had shared countless Christmas mornings, birthday parties, and family dinners? The house that had, for better or worse, defined my childhood. I should have felt something. Guilt, worry, maybe even a flicker of responsibility. But all I felt was a dull, detached sort of numbness. They had gotten themselves into this mess, and I had finally decided I wasn't going to be the one to pull them out of it. A few days later, as I was pouring myself a cup of coffee, there was another knock at my door. It was the kind of sharp, insistent banging that made the walls shake. I opened it to find my mother standing there, her face pale, eyes red-rimmed, clutching her purse like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Mom," I said, my tone flat, "what are you doing here?" She pushed past me without a word, dropping her purse onto my kitchen counter and turning to face me, her eyes blazing. "This has gone far enough, Matthew," she snapped, her voice trembling. "You're tearing this family apart." I closed the door, slowly leaning against it as I crossed my arms. "Am I said, my tone calm but with a sharp edge. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I'm just refusing to clean up another one of your messes." Her eyes filled with fresh tears, and for a moment I felt a pang of something. Not quite guilt, but a ghost of the old obligation I had always felt. "Matthew, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We're going to lose the house. Your father's health isn't what it used to be. We just need a little help, just this once." I let out a long, slow breath, my fingers tightening around my crossed arms. "Just this once," I repeated, my voice dripping with bitter sarcasm. "You said that the first time you asked for help with the electric bill, and then the time James needed money for Tom's braces. And again when you needed help with the car repairs, the mortgage, the endless emergencies that always seemed to fall on my shoulders." She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, cutting her off. "Do you even hear yourself?" I continued, my voice growing colder. "You've been taking advantage of me for years, treating me like your personal safety net, while you and James spend money like it grows on trees. First-class tickets, expensive family vacations, new cars, and now you come to me desperate and panicked because you've finally run out of other people's money." She flinched at my words, her lower lip trembling as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Matthew," she choked out, "we're family." I let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "Family," I repeated, shaking my head. "You don't even know what that word means. You've taken and taken from me, never once stopping to ask what I needed, what I wanted. You've treated me like a walking ATM, a backup plan, and now you expect me to save you again." She took a shaky step toward me, reaching out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back, my jaw clenched. "No," I said, my voice firm. "Not this time. You made your choices, you spent your money. You prioritized James and his family over me time and time again. And now you get to live with the consequences." Her face crumpled, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "But Matt," she whispered, her voice broken, "we have nowhere else to turn." I stared at her, feeling a cold, hard finality settle into my bones. "Then maybe it's time you figured out how to stand on your own," I said quietly. She let out a choked sob, clutching her purse to her chest like it could somehow shield her from the truth I had just laid bare. For a moment we just stood there, the air between us thick with years of unspoken resentment and unmet expectations. Finally, without another word, she turned and walked out of my apartment, her footsteps heavy, the door clicking shut behind her, like the final note of a long, bitter symphony. I stood there for a long time after she left, staring at the door, my heart pounding in my chest. Then slowly I walked back to the kitchen, picked up my coffee, and took a long, slow sip, letting the bitter taste wash over my tongue. It tasted like freedom. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had truly broken free from the chains of obligation, from the invisible leash that had kept me bound to my family's endless demands and manipulations. But even as I sat there, a strange, unsettling quiet settled over me. I had stood my ground, drawn my line in the sand, and watched as my mother walked out of my life. But deep down I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The days after my mother's desperate visit felt strangely quiet. I had expected more calls, more guilt-laden messages, perhaps even a surprise visit from my father, his stern voice attempting to drag me back into the fold. But instead there was nothing, just a heavy, echoing silence. I took advantage of it. I started taking long walks in the mornings, exploring parts of the city I hadn't seen in years. I reconnected with old friends, went to a few live music shows, even joined a hiking group that met on weekends. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was living for myself. Then one morning, as I sipped my coffee on the balcony, my phone buzzed with a message from an old mutual friend, David. "Hey man, heard about your folks. Tough break. Hope you're holding up." I frowned, my heart sinking. What had happened now? Before I could respond, another message came through. "You might want to check Facebook. James has been posting some interesting stuff." I set my coffee down, my pulse quickening as I grabbed my laptop and logged in. James's profile was plastered with a series of long, rambling posts, each one more desperate and bitter than the last. He had posted about the house, about my refusal to help, about how I had abandoned our family in their time of need. He painted himself as the struggling father, the devoted son, trying to hold everything together while his selfish, heartless brother turned his back on them. And the comments, God, the comments. Friends, extended family members, even old neighbors were chiming in, offering their sympathy, their support, their thinly veiled criticisms of me. I can't believe Matt would just walk away like that. Family is everything. How could he be so cold? Must be nice to have the luxury to just ignore your responsibilities. I felt my jaw clench, my hands trembling as I scrolled through the endless stream of judgment and pity, the digital pylon fueled by James's carefully crafted narrative. I should have felt anger, outrage, even betrayal. But instead, all I felt was a deep, aching sense of relief. Because for the first time, the mask was off. James had revealed himself, had shown the world the manipulative, self-serving person I had known for years. He had played the victim, twisted the narrative, and painted me as the villain, but in doing so, he had also exposed just how deeply he relied on my support, my silence, my endless, unquestioning loyalty. I closed the laptop, leaning back in my chair as I stared up at the clear blue sky. Let them think what they want. I had spent years living my life on their terms, bending over backward to support a family that had never truly seen me, never valued me beyond what I could provide. They had built their world on my sacrifices, and now without me propping them up, it was crumbling. I took a slow, deep breath, feeling a strange, quiet sense of satisfaction settle over me. This was freedom. A week later, I got a call from David, the same friend who had tipped me off about James's social media meltdown. "Hey man," he said, his voice hesitant. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but I ran into James the other day." I felt my stomach tighten, my grip on the phone tightening. "Okay," I said slowly, and David let out a long sigh. "He's in bad shape, Matt. The house is gone. The bank foreclosed on it last week. He and Anna had to move in with her parents, and they're struggling to keep it together." I closed my eyes, letting out a slow breath. "I figured as much," I said, my voice calm. "They never could manage their finances without my help." David paused for a moment, his tone turning softer. "Look, I know things between you guys have been rough, but I just thought you should know. He's been telling people you cut him off, that you left them to fend for themselves when they needed you the most." I let out a bitter laugh. "Of course he has," I said, shaking my head. "That's the story he always tells. The devoted brother, the struggling family man, the victim of his heartless, ungrateful sibling." David hesitated. "Is it true, though?" he asked quietly. "I mean, I've known you a long time, Matt. This doesn't sound like you." I felt a pang of something. Maybe guilt, maybe regret, maybe just the slow, dull ache of old habits dying hard. "It's true," I said, finally, my voice steady. "I cut them off completely. I had to." David was quiet for a moment, then let out a long, slow breath. "All right," he said finally. "Well, I just thought you should know. For what it's worth, I get it. And if you ever want to grab a beer and talk it out, I'm here." I felt a small, genuine smile tug at the corners of my mouth. "Thanks, man," I said. "I appreciate that." As I hung up, I felt a strange, unfamiliar warmth spreading through my chest, a quiet, steady sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. I had made my choice, drawn my line in the sand, and for the first time, I felt truly free. I picked up my coffee, leaned back in my chair, and watched the sun set over the city skyline. The sky streaked with shades of orange and pink, the air crisp and cool against my skin. I had walked away, broken the chains of obligation and expectation, and reclaimed my life. And as the final rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, I felt a quiet, unshakable certainty settle in my bones. I had made the right choice. I had chosen myself. Story 2. It was a typical Saturday morning in early autumn. I had just finished mowing the lawn and came inside to grab a cold beer. My wife Lisa was sitting on the couch, completely absorbed in her phone, giggling at something on the screen. It wasn't unusual for her to be engrossed in her phone, but something about her behavior felt off. Her laughter seemed too intimate, too personal. She didn't even look up as I walked past her into the kitchen. At first I brushed it off. Lisa had always been friendly and outgoing, and I trusted her implicitly. But as the weeks passed, her behavior became harder to ignore. She was more secretive, with her phone, guarding it like a treasure. She started working late more often, claiming that her company had taken on a big new project. I noticed her texting in the middle of the night, something she'd never done before. One afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. Lisa had gone upstairs to shower, leaving her phone charging on the kitchen counter. I knew I shouldn't invade her privacy, but the knot in my stomach told me otherwise. I hesitated for a moment before picking up her phone. Her passcode hadn't changed her first mistake. What I found shattered me. A string of messages from someone named Brian filled the screen. My heart sank as I scrolled through the thread. The messages were flirtatious, peppered with inside jokes and references to late-night rendezvous. The latest text read, "Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My hands shook as I kept scrolling, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The dates and times lined up perfectly with her so-called work late nights. There were even picture selfies of them together laughing in what looked like a hotel room. She didn't even have the decency to be subtle. The betrayal hit me harder than I thought possible. Lisa, the woman I'd loved and trusted for over a decade, was having an affair. My mind raced through a whirlwind of emotions: anger, heartbreak, disbelief. But most of all, I felt foolish. How had I missed the signs? How long had this been going on under my nose? I set the phone down just as I heard the water stop upstairs. My heart pounded as I forced myself to appear normal. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I needed time to think, to figure out my next move. I knew if I stormed in and accused her, she'd deny it, twist the narrative, and somehow make me out to be the villain. No, I needed to be smart about this, methodical. That night, I barely slept. As Lisa lay beside me, oblivious to the storm brewing in my mind, I replayed the events of the past few months. The pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. The sudden late nights, her distant behavior, the phone she now kept glued to her side. I thought about Brian. Who was he? Did he have a family? Did he know I existed? The next morning, while Lisa was still asleep, I dove into research mode. It didn't take long to find out who Brian was. A quick search through Lisa's social media revealed him in a tagged photo at her company's holiday party last year. He was one of her co-workers, just as I suspected. Further digging revealed something I hadn't anticipated: Brian was married. His wife Karen was tagged in several of his photos along with 2 young kids. The discovery added a new layer to my pain, but also sparked an idea. If Brian had a wife, that meant he had just as much to lose as Lisa. I felt an odd sense of vindication knowing I wasn't the only one being betrayed. For the rest of the day, I couldn't shake the thought of Karen. Did she know what was happening? Had she noticed the same red flags I had? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I wanted to meet her. Not just to share my pain, but to plan something bigger, something that would make both Lisa and Brian regret every moment of their affair. By the time Lisa came home from her supposed errand run, I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to be the passive, heartbroken husband. I was going to take control of the situation. The betrayal wouldn't destroy me, it would define me. And Lisa had no idea what was coming. The morning after discovering Lisa's affair, I woke up feeling strangely calm. The initial wave of devastation had subsided, replaced by a cold, calculated resolve. If she thought I would confront her with tears in my eyes and plead for an explanation, she had severely underestimated me. Lisa had betrayed me, and I would make sure she felt the weight of her choices. The best part, she wouldn't see it coming. First, I needed more information. It wasn't enough to know Brian's name and that he had a wife named Karen. I needed to understand who they were as a couple. If I was going to involve Karen, I couldn't approach her with half-baked suspicions. I spent hours combing through social media profiles. Their posts painted a carefully curated facade of domestic bliss. Karen seemed like a devoted wife and mother, often posting photos of their kids' soccer games and family hikes. The contrast between her online persona and Brian's secret life disgusted me. Using Lisa's messages as my guide, I pieced together a rough timeline of their affair. It had been going on for at least 6 months, though I suspected it could be longer. The messages were littered with mentions of hotels and coded language. What angered me most wasn't just the betrayal, but the effort they had put into hiding it. The lengths they went to deceive me made my blood boil. Once I had a clear picture, I set my plan in motion. I decided to host a backyard gathering, a casual get-together with a twist. It had to appear completely normal, the kind of event Lisa would never question. I drafted a guest list that included our neighbors, a few of Lisa's co-workers excluding Brian, and most importantly, Karen. Reaching out to Karen was the trickiest part. I couldn't exactly call her up and say, "Hi, I'm your husband's mistress's husband. Want to come over for a barbecue?" Instead, I sent her a polite message on Facebook introducing myself as Lisa's husband. I explained that we were hosting a casual neighborhood gathering and wanted to invite her family. I mentioned that we had mutual acquaintances from Lisa's workplace, which wasn't entirely untrue. Karen responded graciously, thanking me for the invitation and confirming that she and Brian would attend. The moment I received her reply, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. Step 1 was complete. Lisa, blissfully unaware, even helped me plan the event. She suggested recipes, picked up decorations, and chatted about how nice it would be to spend time with friends and coworkers. Watching her act so normal while I carried the weight of her betrayal only fueled my determination. I spent the next few days preparing meticulously. The gathering had to appear completely authentic. I mowed the lawn, set up outdoor lighting, and borrowed a large grill from a neighbor. The menu was simple but appealing: burgers, hot dogs, and a few side dishes. I wanted everything to feel unassuming, a picture-perfect suburban barbecue. As the day approached, I noticed Lisa growing a little uneasy. Perhaps she was sensing something, or maybe her guilt was bubbling to the surface. She asked if I had invited anyone from her work, and I casually mentioned a few names, omitting Brian's. Her face relaxed and she smiled, clearly relieved. That moment cemented my resolve. She didn't suspect a thing. On the morning of the gathering, I made sure everything was in place. I double-checked the guest list, arranged the seating to maximize Karen's proximity to Lisa, and rehearsed the conversations I might have. Timing would be everything. My goal wasn't just to expose Lisa's affair, but to orchestrate a scenario where both she and Brian were humiliated in front of Karen. I wanted them to feel the same sense of betrayal I had felt, but magnified by the presence of friends and neighbors. As I stood in the backyard surveying the setup, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity. Lisa had stolen something from me, but I wasn't going to let her keep it. By the time the sun set on that gathering, she would know exactly what it felt like to be blindsided, to have her world ripped apart in an instant. And when Karen walked through that gate hand in hand with her husband, the first domino would fall. All I had to do was wait. The sun sat high that afternoon, casting a warm golden light across my backyard. The grill was already smoking, and the scent of charcoal and seasoned meat floated through the air. Everything looked perfect, intentionally so. The tables were set with paper lanterns and autumn-themed centerpieces. Folding chairs circled the fire pit, and soft jazz played from a Bluetooth speaker tucked discreetly on the porch. Lisa was in a good mood. She moved around the yard, arranging cups and chatting with neighbors as they arrived. Her laugh rang through the air, too bright, too rehearsed. Watching her, I thought back to the texts, the hotel selfies, the inside jokes she shared with Brian. She was acting like everything was normal. Maybe she even believed it still was. By mid-afternoon, most of the guests had arrived. Old friends from our block, Lisa's co-workers, well, the ones I carefully chose. I had introduced everyone, played host, flipped burgers on the grill, and cracked open a cooler full of beers. But all the while, I was watching the gate. Then, like clockwork, they appeared. Brian and Karen walked in together. She had on a breezy floral dress, and he wore the same smug confidence that probably helped him charm his way into my wife's life. Karen beamed as she shook hands with some neighbors. Brian scanned the crowd for familiar faces, and then he saw Lisa. Our eyes met briefly, and I swear I saw the color drain from his face. Lisa had been laughing with a coworker when her gaze landed on them. She stopped mid-sentence. Her posture stiffened, and for a moment I saw something flicker in her eyes. Panic. But just as quickly she masked it. "Oh," she said with a forced smile, "I didn't know they were coming." I shrugged. "Brian mentioned you two had worked together. Thought it would be nice to invite them." Lisa blinked. "Right, sure." I left it there and walked away to refill someone's drink. Let her stew in it. That was the point. Let them guess how much I knew. Let the guilt burn under their skin like slow sun poisoning. Karen, of course, was blissfully unaware. She laughed freely, chatting with Lisa as if they were old friends. She complimented the setup, asked Lisa for gardening tips, and smiled so earnestly that even I felt a twinge of remorse for her, not for Lisa. Brian, on the other hand, couldn't look either of us in the eye. His beer bottle never left his hand, and he kept repositioning himself around the yard like a man trying to find cover in a battlefield. As the afternoon waned, I orchestrated seating arrangements. Karen and Lisa found themselves side by side at the picnic table while Brian was across from me. I asked him questions about work, leaned into the conversation, all while watching Lisa squirm as Karen spoke kindly to her. So I said, passing a dish down the table, "Brian, how's the travel schedule these days? Still hitting up all those regional conferences?" Lisa froze. Brian cleared his throat. Yeah, same as always. Long hours." Karen laughed. "He's hardly home, but he always texts when he lands. Last time he even sent a photo from the airport to prove it. You know, just so I don't worry." I nodded, eyes locked on Lisa. Photos help. Can be revealing. Brian's hand twitched, gripping his fork tighter. Lisa's jaw tensed. I sipped my drink and changed the subject, leaving them to stew. After dessert, guests began to drift into smaller groups. I moved between conversations, keeping tabs on everyone. When Lisa tried to pull me aside, I brushed her off with a smile and excused myself to check the firewood. She was unraveling and I wanted her to. Around 7:30, the string lights flickered on overhead. The backyard looked idyllic, warm and inviting, but the air crackled with the tension between four people holding onto fragile facades. And now it was time to break them. I grabbed my drink and tapped a spoon against the rim. Everyone, I called out, if I could have your attention just for a second. The chatter stopped. Heads turned. Even the kids running around paused. Thank you all for coming tonight. It's not every day we get to slow down and spend time together, and I especially want to thank Lisa, my wife, for helping pull this whole thing together. There was polite clapping. Lisa smiled, though her lips were tight. But I continued. Tonight's not just about burgers and beer. It's also about honesty, about trust, about the things we count on in a marriage. You could hear the air shift. Some of you may not know, I said that the last few months have been eye-opening for me. I've learned a lot, like how easy it is to miss the signs when someone you love is keeping secrets, or how deep betrayal can run when it comes from the person you've built a life with. I looked at Lisa. Her eyes were wide now. Her hand trembled around her glass. She opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. Lisa, I said evenly, maybe now's a good time to tell everyone here, especially Karen, what's been going on with you and Brian. The silence was immediate and suffocating. Karen turned to Brian, then back to Lisa. What is he talking about? Brian went pale. Lisa tried to speak. It's not. I stepped in. Oh, it is. The texts, the pictures, the hotel meetups. I've got it all. I just figured a nice neighborhood barbecue was as good a time as any to come clean. Karen stood slowly, her eyes locked on Brian. Is this true? He looked at the ground. Lisa began to cry. James, please, not like this. No, exactly like this, I said. In front of the same people you both lied to. You embarrassed me in private. So now you can feel what that's like. Karen walked off, tears in her eyes. Brian chased after her, but she pushed him away. Don't touch me, she hissed, loud enough for the whole yard to hear. The guests stared in stunned silence. I set my drink down. Thanks for coming, everyone. Guess that's all for tonight. People left quietly. Some muttered sympathy. Others didn't know where to look. No one spoke to Lisa. She stood in the center of the yard, mascara streaked down her cheeks, looking at me like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. Good, because I wasn't that man anymore. I was the one who saw the truth, who stopped pretending, who stopped letting love blind me to disrespect. That night when the last guest was gone and the lights were off, Lisa tried to speak. I didn't let her. You broke this, I said. Now you live in the ruins. And I left her standing there in the dark, in the silence of the life she'd burned down. The silence that followed the party was heavier than anything I'd known in our marriage. The house, once filled with familiar habits and domestic rituals, now echoed like a hollow drum. Lisa didn't say much after that night. She spent the next few days moving like a ghost through the halls, tiptoeing around my presence, hoping maybe this would blow over. It wouldn't. The day after the backyard bombshell, I took off work. I needed space, not just from her, but from everything. I spent the morning cleaning up the remnants of the party, folding chairs, discarded napkins, bottles half empty and forgotten in corners of the yard. Each item I picked up felt like closing a chapter, like dragging the weight of our shared life out into the open piece by piece and letting it go. Lisa came outside just as I was stacking the chairs. James. She started, her voice small like a child who'd broken something and was hoping not to be punished. We should talk. I didn't look at her. Talk about what? That it was a mistake, that you didn't mean to hurt me. She stepped closer. Yes, and that I'm sorry. I know I messed up, but we've been together so long. Doesn't that mean something? I turned then, meeting her eyes. They were swollen and red, the same eyes I once loved, now dulled by guilt. It meant something, I said. But it doesn't mean what it used to. She didn't respond. Maybe she knew she'd lost her footing. Maybe she thought tears would soften me. But I was done being the man who looked away from the truth because it was inconvenient. I was done being easy to lie to. That night I changed the locks, not as revenge, not out of spite, just a quiet, firm line in the sand. She left 2 days later without drama. Just packed a suitcase and went to stay with a friend. She left behind everything else, clothes, photos, half the furniture. The bed felt bigger without her, but also lighter. Karen and I eventually talked. She called me a week after the party. I just wanted to thank you, she said, her voice calm but tired. Not for what happened, but for telling me the truth. You deserve to know, I replied. I should have seen it, she whispered, but I didn't want to believe anything was wrong. We talked for almost an hour, not as victims, not as people looking for comfort, just two strangers caught in the wreckage of someone else's choices. She filed for divorce from Brian, Told me later he tried to deny everything until the evidence piled too high to climb over. I'm not mad about the end, she said. I'm mad that I love someone who didn't value what we built. That stuck with me. Because that was exactly it. Lisa's parents called a week later. Her mom asked to meet. I agreed. We sat on the patio of a quiet diner off the highway. Her eyes were kind but guarded, like she didn't know which side of the story to believe. She says you humiliated her. I nodded. She humiliated herself. She says she wants to fix it. She already broke it. She sighed, setting down her coffee. She made a terrible mistake. But you were a good husband, she knows that now. I shook my head. She should have known that before. There wasn't much more to say after that. They stopped calling. The neighborhood never looked at us the same again. Some people tried to avoid eye contact in the weeks after. Others, mostly the ones who stayed late at the party, nodded at me with a different kind of respect. Not admiration, just understanding. Like they'd seen behind the curtain and realized I'd been living under a weight they hadn't noticed. Lisa moved in with her sister across town. We kept the communication brief, just enough to handle the paperwork. She asked once if we could try counseling. I told her we needed closure, not a second chance. I took up hiking. It wasn't something I'd done before, not seriously. But there was something about walking in silence, about being surrounded by things older and more honest than my problems that helped. Trees don't lie. Mountains don't pretend. The trail doesn't make excuses for being steep or hard. That was the clarity I needed. I started reading more, too. Reorganized the house. Got rid of the cheap hotel decor Lisa had picked out during one of her modern design phases. Replaced it with wood canvas and quiet. The house finally felt like mine. 3 months after the divorce papers were finalized, I got a letter from Lisa. Not an email. A handwritten letter. It was long, 5 pages. She apologized. Profusely. Not just for the affair, but for the years she let the marriage coast. She admitted to taking my patience for granted, admitted that Brian wasn't worth it, that it wasn't even about him, really. I was looking for something exciting because I forgot how to find meaning in what was already good, she wrote, and I know that's no excuse. You were always kind, always stable, and I treated your consistency like boredom. I read it twice, then folded it up and put it in a drawer. I didn't write back. Some things don't need responses. It's strange how quiet can become a comfort. How peace after so much noise feels like a luxury you forgot you deserved. I used to think that keeping a marriage together at all costs was a virtue, that forgiving without question was strength. But now I know sometimes walking away is what strength looks like. Sometimes silence is the loudest truth. Sometimes you have to lose something to find out who you really are. And I'm not bitter, not anymore. I'm just free. I still host gatherings, smaller now. A few friends, some neighbors. There's always beer on the back patio, a fire going, laughter in the yard. No secrets, no lies. Just people being real with each other. Funny how that's all I ever wanted. Funny how I had to lose everything to get it. Story 3. I found out the family trip was happening without me through a Facebook post. One photo. That's all it took to unravel everything I thought I understood about where I stood in my family. My name's Rachel Bennett. I'm 27, work as a shift manager at a local coffee shop, and I've always been the kind of person who tries to keep the peace, especially when it comes to my family. I'm the one who remembers birthdays, organizes holiday dinners, and checks in when no one else does. So when my mom texted me 3 weeks before our long-awaited family vacation to say they were postponing until next year, I believed her. Sweetheart, we just can't afford it right now. We'll make it happen next summer, I promise. It hurt, but I understood. Money's tight for a lot of people. I offered to cover my own airfare, maybe even split the hotel cost to help out. She gently turned that down too. It's just not the right time, honey. We'll go next year, promise. That word, promise. I should have known better. I'd been working double shifts, skipping nights out, pinching every dollar just to make sure I could contribute. We hadn't taken a family trip in nearly a decade. This one was going to be special. Mom, Dad, my younger brother Chris, and me. A full week by the beach, the first getaway since we lost my grandmother. I let it go. I told myself maybe they really were strapped for cash. I didn't ask more questions. Then 2 days later, during a break at work, I opened Facebook. And there it was. A photo of my parents and Chris on a beach. Mom was holding a margarita. Dad was in his favorite sun hat, and Chris had his arm around his new girlfriend, smiling at the camera like everything was perfect. The caption, "Family time is priceless." No mention of a postponement, no wish Rachel could be here, just a happy vacation without me. At first I thought it was an old photo, but then I saw the timestamp, posted that morning. And then came the rest photos from a boat ride, a seafood dinner, Chris and his girlfriend paddleboarding. They hadn't postponed the trip. They just excluded me from it. I sat there in the break room staring at my phone, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat in stunned silence, letting the reality settle like a rock in my stomach. They didn't even lie to cover it well. Just assumed I'd never see it. Or worse, they didn't care if I did. I didn't call them, didn't message. I just let the pictures roll, in each one confirming what I already knew: I was never part of the plan. I replayed it all in my head over and over that week. All the moments I'd been overlooked. The time they forgot my birthday but went all out for Chris's. The way Mom would interrupt me to ask Chris how his gaming side business was going. The family holidays where I brought the food cleaned up afterward and somehow still felt invisible. It wasn't just the trip. The trip was the last straw. When they got home, I was ready. I was in the kitchen when I heard their car pull up. I watched them through the window, laughing, tan unloading luggage. They walked through the door like nothing happened. Mom gave me a bright smile. "Oh, Rachel, we missed you so much. How's work?" I stared at her, calm, cold. "Busy," I said. While you were gone." Chris yawned and stretched like he'd just finished a long nap. "Travel is exhausting. Hope the house didn't burn down while we were away." I tilted my head at him. "No fires, just quiet." They kept trying to chat like it was all normal, like I hadn't been home alone while they were making memories in paradise. Then I said it. "So, how was the trip?" They froze for half a second, just long enough to confirm the guilt. "Oh," Mom said, fake casual. "Well, we just needed a little escape, nothing big." I unlocked my phone, scrolled to the photos, and turned the screen toward them. "The seafood restaurant looked nice," I said, staring at her. "You guys look really happy." Her face drained. Dad stepped in with some half-hearted excuse about things being last minute. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't cry, I just asked the question. "Why didn't you just tell me you didn't want me there?" No answer. Just that awkward silence people make when they're caught and can't lie fast enough. Chris rolled his eyes. "It's not that deep, Rachel. It was just a vacation." Just a vacation. The one I helped plan. The one I worked extra for. The one I thought we were all looking forward to. I shook my head. "You lied. You didn't postpone anything. You just didn't include me." Chris scoffed. "You're being dramatic." And that's when I lost it. "No, Chris. I'm finally being honest. You all treat me like a backup plan. Like I exist to make things easier for you. I cook the meals. I remember the birthdays. I sit through the uncomfortable dinners. But when it's time for fun, for joy, I'm never invited." Mom tried to step in, her voice soft. "Rachel, it's not what you think." "Then explain it," I snapped. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think." She looked at Dad. He looked at the floor. "Exactly." I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Mom called. "Somewhere I don't feel like an afterthought." I turned off my phone for the weekend. Booked a last-minute cabin upstate. Just me, the woods, and some cheap wine. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. They messaged, called, left voicemails, first defensive, then guilt-ridden, then apologetic. But I didn't answer. Not yet. Let them sit in the silence. I had sat in theirs long enough. I wasn't sure what would happen next. I didn't know if they'd really understand how deep the hurt ran. But for once, I was no longer the one scrambling to fix everything. That alone felt like a step in the right direction. I didn't answer the first 20 calls or the next 10 texts. A week went by and I let it. I'd spent too many years being the one who reached first, who patched things up just so everyone else could feel better while I sat with the wound. But silence has a weight of its own, and it teaches. Teaches who will sit with their guilt and who will walk away from it. My mother didn't walk away. On the 9th day, she showed up at my apartment. She knocked softly like she didn't want to scare me, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed anymore. I opened the door a few inches and leaned on the frame. She looked small, not in size but in presence, like someone unsure of their place. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice low. I stepped aside. We didn't sit. We just stood there in my living room facing each other like strangers who vaguely recognized each other's pain. "I know I messed up," she started. "We messed up." I said nothing, not out of cruelty but because I was done giving easy outs. She looked down at her hands. "The trip, that was wrong. Lying to you was wrong. I don't know what I thought. That you wouldn't care as much, that it wouldn't hurt you like it did." "You mean because I'm used to it?" I asked. She winced. "No, I guess that's what makes this worse. Maybe I did assume that you're strong, independent, that you'd brush it off." I exhaled through my nose. Do you even hear what that sounds like? You're strong, so we left you behind. She didn't try to defend it, that was new. I want to change, she said. I don't know how yet, but I know this can't keep happening. There was a pause. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse and set it on my kitchen counter. What is that? A letter. From your dad, too. We wrote it after dinner the other night. Chris doesn't know. This is just from us. I picked it up but didn't open it. I'll read it later. She nodded, then turned to go. Before she stepped out, she stopped and looked over her shoulder. Whatever you decide, I get it. But I hope you'll let us try. That night, I finally read the letter. It wasn't poetic or full of grand gestures, just two people stumbling through accountability. They admitted they'd been unfair, that I'd been left behind too many times, that the trip was more than just bad judgment, it was a pattern. At the end, Dad had scrawled something in his clunky handwriting. You've been the strongest part of this family for years. I think we leaned on that too hard. You deserved better. We're sorry. We'll do better if you'll let us. That was the part that cracked something open. Not because it erased anything, but because for once they weren't pretending it hadn't happened. A week later, I let them take me to dinner. It was awkward. No one really knew how to act. Chris wasn't there, which I appreciated. I needed space from him most of all. Mom asked about work. Dad actually listened when I talked. They didn't try to force anything, and for once they didn't ask for forgiveness. They just sat with me, let things be messy. When the check came, Dad reached for it like always, but then paused. Actually, he said, Rachel, this is on us. Not because we owe you, though we do, but because we want to. You've paid more than your share in more ways than one. I didn't cry, but I felt the sting of tears behind my eyes anyway. It was a start. Chris didn't reach out until a month later. A casual text. You still mad? I stared at it for a full 5 minutes. Then I typed back, not mad, just done playing the background. He didn't respond right away. The next morning, he sent another message. You're right, I messed up. Let me know when you're ready to talk. I'll actually listen this time. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, I just wasn't there yet. And that was okay. Around that time, I started therapy. A coworker referred me to someone who specialized in family dynamics and self-worth. It was the first time I'd ever said some of the quiet parts out loud. Like how I'd spent my childhood trying to be easy. How I minimized my needs so others wouldn't have to carry them. How I made myself small so Chris could shine. How I convinced myself it didn't matter because they were doing their best. But you know what? Sometimes doing your best still breaks people. And being the one who gets broken, even if it wasn't intentional, still deserves to be acknowledged. 2 months after the beach incident, my parents invited me over for dinner. I almost said no. Then Mom added in the message, no pressure, no expectations, just a meal and your favorite pasta. You can leave anytime. So I went. And it was nice. Not perfect, but honest. They asked questions. They paused to listen. When I talked about a promotion I was working toward, they actually celebrated it. And for once, it didn't turn into a story about Chris. Didn't get redirected or diminished. It was mine. A few days after that dinner, I got a call from my dad. It was 7:30 p.m. I assumed he butt-dialed me honestly. But when I picked up, he said, Hey, I was just thinking about you. I waited. That wasn't something he ever said. Thinking about what you said, actually. About how long you've been left out. It's been eating at me. He paused, then, I'm proud of you, Rachel. Always have been. I just didn't say it enough. I swallowed hard. Thanks, Dad. Then he added, voice a little rough. Next year's trip, wherever you want to go. You name it. I didn't say yes. Not yet. But I didn't say no either. Later that week, I told my therapist, it feels weird letting them try. Part of me wants to keep punishing them, keep them locked out. She nodded, then asked gently, and what would that do for you? I didn't answer, because I already knew. I didn't forgive them all at once. That's not how healing works. But I did start letting them show up. And this time they actually did. They didn't try to rush me, they gave me room. Chris and I eventually talked too. That conversation wasn't easy, but it was honest. He admitted he'd always thought I was fine, that because I didn't ask for much, he didn't think I needed much. You made it easy to overlook you, he said quietly. And while it hurt, I knew he didn't mean it cruelly. He meant that I'd built a shell so well, they forgot there was a person inside it. I'm trying to change that, I said. He nodded, and I'll try to meet you halfway. That was all I needed. Not grand gestures, just a seat at the table that wasn't offered out of guilt, but respect. There's still a long way to go. I'm still unlearning the idea that I have to earn space in my own family. But for the first time in a long time, I'm not walking that road alone. And I'm not invisible anymore. Spring came early that year. Maybe it was just the sunlight through my kitchen window or the sound of birds returning to the trees behind my apartment, but it felt different, lighter. That's how healing sneaks up on you sometimes, not in loud declarations but in quiet mornings where your chest doesn't feel quite so heavy. It had been 6 months since the beach trip, since the lie, since everything cracked open. And slowly the space between me and my parents stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like a boundary, a good one I'd built with purpose, not pain. They had honored it too, not perfectly but consistently. No more guilt texts, no backhanded comments about how I was being distant. Instead, they checked in without pressure, asked about my life instead of assuming it didn't need asking about. Even Chris. He started sending the occasional meme. Not much, but enough. Enough to say, I see you. It wasn't a full repair. Not yet. Maybe never. But it was something. Something that felt real. Then one afternoon in May, my mom called with a question that caught me off guard. We're planning a trip this summer, she said. Same beach town. It's not for a few months, but we wanted to know if you'd come. She paused. Only if you want to. My first instinct was hesitation. Not because I didn't appreciate the offer, but because the beach was where the fracture had begun. That place held the shadow of everything they hadn't told me. But then again, maybe that's why it mattered. You're asking this time, I said quietly. Yes, she replied, and we mean it. I didn't answer right away, but 3 days later I texted her. I'll come, I'd like to try. The rental house was nothing fancy. 2 stories, ocean view, sand in the corners of every floorboard. But it wasn't about the house. It was about the fact that this time there was a room with my name on it. Not an afterthought, not the couch. An actual room. With a folded towel on the bed and a note that read, "We're glad you're here." They didn't overdo it. No dramatic speeches, no awkward attempts to force closeness. Instead, they just included me. They asked what I wanted to do. They waited for my answers before making plans. When Chris offered to grill one night, he asked if I could help because you always know how to time the sides right. He said it like a compliment, not an obligation. Later that night, we sat on the deck and watched the waves roll in. Chris cracked a beer. I sipped my lemonade. I was a jerk, he said quietly, not looking at me. You didn't deserve how we handled things. I didn't reply at first, because part of me still wanted to hold the grudge, to make him feel the weight of every time I was forgotten. But another part of me, the part that had grown these last few months, knew the truth. He was trying. Thanks, I said finally, for saying it out loud. He nodded once. I'm glad you came. Me too. The next day, we all walked the shoreline together. Mom collected seashells. Dad carried the cooler. Chris and I kept pace in the middle. At one point, I stopped and looked back. A few months ago, they had walked this beach without me. Now we were walking it together. And that was no small thing. Back home, I started noticing more little changes. Mom texted me, just because not to ask for something but to share a recipe or a funny picture of the cat. Dad sent me a photo from his garden, the first tomato of the season, planted with your stubbornness in mind, he joked. Even Chris called once when he heard I'd been promoted at work. He didn't say much, he never did, but he said enough. I knew you'd get it, he said. You always do. One afternoon, I sat with my therapist and said, it's not perfect, but it's not performative anymore either. She smiled. And how does that feel? I took a moment. It feels earned. I won't pretend things were magically repaired. That would be a disservice to everything I went through. There were still moments where I felt like the old version of me, the one who apologized too fast or shrank to keep peace. But now I caught those moments. I named them, and I chose different ones. I chose myself. And in doing that, I gave others the space to choose me too. A year after that beach trip, the one I didn't get to go on, we took another one. Different town, different house, same family. But this time when I arrived, there wasn't tension in the air. There was just warmth. Mom had baked my favorite cookies. Dad had booked a dinner reservation he knew I'd like. Chris had packed board games, some of my favorites among them. No one made a big deal out of it, but I noticed, and quietly I thanked them. On our last night there, we lit a fire on the beach. It was late. The stars were out. The waves whispered their old stories to the shore. Mom sat beside me, her hand tucked in her lap. You're quieter tonight, she said. I'm just thinking, I replied. She waited like she knew I wasn't finished. I used to feel invisible around you guys, I said, my voice soft but steady, but I don't anymore. She reached out, gently took my hand. I'm glad. I see you now. I mean, I always saw you, but now I really see you. I smiled. It only took 30 years. She laughed through her nose. We're slow learners. But you're learning, I said. That's what matters. We sat in the quiet for a while, just watching the flames dance. Chris tossed a marshmallow into the fire. Do you think it's weird that we had to break everything before we could figure out how to fix it? He asked. I shook my head. Sometimes breaking is the only way you realize something wasn't whole in the first place. When we got home, life went back to normal. But normal didn't mean forgotten. They kept showing up. I kept letting them. I had my own life now, one built on firmer ground with boundaries that didn't have to be shouted to be respected. And somehow making room for myself made room for everyone else too. Last week I got a postcard in the mail, no name on the front, just an ocean photo and one sentence written in familiar handwriting. Thanks for giving us another chance to walk beside you. I didn't need to guess who sent it. I just pinned it to my fridge and smiled, because I wasn't walking behind anymore. I was walking forward, and they were finally learning how to keep pace.